did it with the previous person that came on stream. I actually said, I said the things I wanted to say very clearly, but I still did so in a kind of, joking sort of tone, and I that is not what I really intended. That's not what I should have done. So I still have to do it again in a more serious fashion, unfortunately. Um, of course, it's hard to do it, because I like I don't want to hurt them and I don't want to hurt myself, and I feel like the kind of stuff I'm going to be saying is hurtful, and obviously, and then of course, like I know that people think that all this stuff I'm saying is absurd, um, and I feel it makes it seem less absurd, right? If I say it in a joking tone. Um, but no, I have to start being more. I have to be more serious, and I have to be more serious and sincere. And so I'm doing it again. I'll wait for somebody to come, and I'll say these things in a sincere and serious fashion. And so actually, so I had a look at Scientology. It's true. I should have looked into this before, and it's interesting. So um, it's not thetans. Thetans apparently are just basically the soul. But Echoplex said that the soul crud is like the thetans. Um, Scientology it said body thetans. Um, but it seems to be that there's something else. So I actually had to um look into this, and so um here we go. So yeah, so I had sort of looked into this sort of Dianetic stuff, which apparently is the previous thing, which is where you have like these, this is more like the soul crud, right? They talk about this reactive mind, so that's where there's the pain and emotional trauma. Um, and then they say that there's, maybe if I zoom in, you'll be able to actually read this. So yeah. Oh, wait. Wait, so there's body and thetan, but they say that the thetan is the person, but it basically is the soul, and that's the person. See, there's the spirit, mind, and body. So there isn't a body thetan, right? It's more that there's the true the spirit is the thetan, and so it's not the soul crud that is the thetan, but just the soul that is the thetan. And so rather so there's this Dianetics thing, and so there's a trauma, and that is engrams, right? And that is right. Dianetics hold that even if the traumatic experience is forgotten, the engram remains embedded in the reactive mind. So I used to think that soul crud was a result of trauma. Now I no longer think so. So in fact, that is even a separate thing. So in fact, I could use this term engram. What did I use some other term? No, I don't. Oh yeah, I called it missues for mental issues. So that was the term I used, but I could use engrams, but I think I prefer misuse because plus I don't really want to use a Scientology term, especially since since people really largely have a negative impression of it. So yeah, but that's what I call now misuse, which is not a term I've used much. And so then there's also soul crud, which is now a different thing, because it's not necessarily trauma. Soul cred is just what makes you kind of an idiot. Um, and then let's see, is there anything else that I should? Yeah, so they say that these engrams cause people problems ranging from neurosis to physical sickness to insanity. So I would agree, but there's both soul crud and there's the misuse, the trauma, and so they would have sort of differing effects. The trauma would have more like overt like pain effects, whereas the soul crud would make you just more of a general kind of an idiot without you suffering from it so much. Um, so yeah, and in fact, the people who have less soul cred tend to be more sensitive to the trauma, to the misuse. So that's why people with less soul cred tend to have more um, overt neurotic issues, so emotional kind of issues, and also more over, like psychiatrically recognized psychosis. But people with more soul crud always have psychosis, but in a way that's always functional because it's a sort of it's like a voluntary but psychosis, but at the subconscious level. So they sort of choose to be psychotic when it doesn't like hinder their own well-being typically. So it makes them seem very insincere and basically makes them seem like liars. So people with soul crud tend to quite typically seem like liars. But of course, there's lots of, I mean, there's people with low soul crud that also are kind of that have the sort of more less conformist psychosis, whereas those with high soul crud have very conformist psychosis. Um, and so, yeah, anyway, I mean, I'm not really here to discuss all this, but rather, yeah, it's kind of interesting to compare Scientology with my thing, but it's not the same. And in any case, I hadn't even looked into it, so it'll be interesting to see in how they resemble one another. So I'd sort of already had a quick look before going on here, and so yeah. So the funny thing is that there's these levels that you have to go through, and there's auditing you have to do, and you have to pay to go through this and all that. So that's the kind of stuff I already knew about. I was less aware of the sort of greater cosmology and stuff. So I wasn't really aware of this term thetan. I mean, no, was aware of the term. I didn't know that it just meant a soul. But it seems that Echoplex that I had doesn't really realize that either, or maybe I've just misunderstood. Um, okay, so there's this space opera, which is sort of this is sort of funny. I mean, I don't know why they call it space opera, but what they mean is just like history, basically, but long-term history, which I have too. And again, it's quite similar to other stuff because this is constant. It sort of follows the sort of recurring thread in mythology of a sort of more advanced time long ago, right? You have that in many mythologies. You have that in the sort of golden age mythology of the Greeks. You have that in the Garden of Eden, actually. And you have that in a New Age religion as this idea that there was like Atlantis that then like collapses and stuff, and so that's so there's this common theme, right, of a prior more advanced and more good civilization, and so this is interesting. So and it always ends in a catastrophe. There's always some part of catastrophe that ends it. So what I figured is that simply let's, what do these things have in common, and let's try to figure out a rational explanation, like something that could have actually happened that would have been the inspiration for these myths, and that serves as the basis for my own explanation, which is just that there was without all this weirdness, right? And so instead, it's just that there's a pan-universal civilization, and then soul crud develops, and that soul crud makes them suddenly become antagonistic to one another. There's tribalism or tribism, as I call it, that develops, and as a result, there's some sort of conflict, and that results in civilizational collapse and lots of people dying. And that's and often that in mythology that event is remembered as a flood. And that's why I'm just calling that event the flood. But obviously, I don't actually expect it to be literally a flood. Um, so so let's have a look. But obviously, so Hubbard wrote about a great catastrophe that took place 75 million years ago. He referred to this as Incident 2, one of several universal incidents that hindered the Thetan's ability to remember its origins. According to the story, 75 million years ago, there's a galactic federation of 76 planets ruled over by a leader called Xenu, or Xenu, they would say. The Federation was overpopulated, and to deal with this problem, Xenu, I'll prefer, people probably say like Xenu or something, but I like saying more in the more etymological way, so I'll say Xenu, transported large numbers of people to the planet T-Jack Earth. He then detonated hydrogen bombs and volcanoes to exterminate the surplus population. The Thetans I should say Thetans also, if I'm going to be more like that. So the Thetans of those killed were then packaged, by which, and it's probably even Thetans anyway, because like we say Theta, not Theta. So yeah, by which Hubbard meant that they were clustered together. Implants were inserted into them, designed to kill any body that these thetans would subsequently inhabit should they recall the event of their destruction. After the Tijak massacre, several of the officers in Xenu's service rebelled against him, ultimately capturing and imprisoning him. According to OT documents discussing Incident 2, the bodies of those Xenu placed on Tijak were destroyed, but their inner thetans survived and continued to carry the trauma of this event. Scientology. Okay, and I guess presumably then they reincarnate or something, and they keep reincarnating on Tijak. But in any case, this is silly because we would have, like, if there was such a thing, there would be, in the paleontological record, in the fossil record, there would be a memory of this. And obviously there isn't. Like, you would see like structures and buildings, or and all sorts of other, like molecules and stuff that were produced by activity, like anthropic, in the broad sense of anthropic activity, and there's none of it. So clearly that doesn't happen. This is why I'm saying that my theory is rational, right? According to OT documents discussing Incident 2, the bodies of those, yes, I already said that. Scientology maintains that some of these traumatized thetans, which lack bodies of their own, become body thetans. Oh, okay. So this is the body thetans, clustering around living people and negatively impacting them. Okay, but that is like, oh, that's like Philip. So that's not like soul crud. This is like Philip Goddard's idea of parasitic souls, which that I just called unincarnable souls, but which now I just no longer believe in. So that because I think there isn't good evidence for that, and in a way, in any case, Goddard's explanation for it didn't really make sense. Because it was like there's this idea that the unincarnable souls are those who have so much soul crud that they can't incarnate, right? But the weird thing is that when you accumulate soul crud, you become less and less sensitive. But then the weird thing that Philip said is that you then feel all the trauma of these unincarnable souls. But the thing is that that seems a bit odd, given that they themselves can't feel it, and precisely like the more, I mean, obviously it's not logically impossible, but it just seems a bit odd that it would be like that. But I do think it is, like, it's possible. It's possible that there is this unincarnable soul phenomenon. I just don't think that's the case, and but who knows? Who knows? It's possible. It's possible. But yeah, that's the thing that's actually changed in my own thinking, is I no longer think it's very probable that there are unincarnable souls anymore. And also it seems a bit weird, that soul crud would have like such an impact on a person when it's part of your own soul, but then the other people's soul crud, then, I mean, it impacts you in terms of making you really foolish and rigid. But then when you have other people that are unincarnable souls that have lots of soul crud and they're implanted into you, then weirdly, instead of making you more rigid or something, you feel their trauma, their trauma precisely, and instead of acquiring their foolishness and rigidity. So that's what didn't really make sense in Goddard's model. And then there's the issue that people with more crud are supposedly like stronger in a sense, but then somehow they can't accommodate as many unincarnable souls, according to Goddard. So that's sort of weird. Like, you're like, as a person with low soul crud, you're supposedly like really fragile and stuff, but at the same time you can carry a bunch of unincarnable souls that themselves have a bunch of soul crud. That also seemed a bit odd, right? And so at least Goddard's model seems a bit odd for those reasons, right? That doesn't really make all that much sense to me. Okay, so let's keep on going. Many of the advanced auditing techniques taught to Scientologists focused on dealing with these body thetans, awakening them from the amnesia they experience and allowing them to detach from the bodies they cluster around. Yeah. Once free, they're capable of either being born into bodies or of their choosing or remaining detached from any physical form. Yeah, and that's another thing is that I don't think, and like Goddard also likewise, basically I used to think that you might remain conscious, but only like in experiencing illusions by the Gorth when you're unincarnated. And now I think it's more likely that you're just unconscious while unincarnated. And so for me, these are all improvements, and I think this is better. Obviously, I wasn't happy about the idea of remaining conscious while unincarnated because it didn't seem very fun, and basically it's not something I wanted. But again, I don't know for sure, and I've already explained this. This is basically a realization that I already had a year ago. That it's a year ago that I sort of had this. So I'm well past thinking about that now. So now I'm just interested in looking at the correlation with this stuff. Hubbard claimed to have discovered the Xenu myth in December 1967, having taken the plunge deep into his time track. He commented that he was probably the only one ever to do so in 75 million years. Scientology teaches that attempting to recover this information from the time track typically results in an individual's death, caused by the presence of Xenu's implants, but that because of Hubbard's technology, this death can be avoided. Oh yeah, and here's a picture of Xenu. Somebody dressed as Xenu. As the church argues that learning the Xenu myth can be harmful for those unprepared for it, the documents discussing Xenu were restricted for those church members who had reached the OT3 level known as the Wall of Fire. Those OT3 teachings about Xenu were later leaked by ex-members, becoming a matter of public record after being submitted as evidence in court cases. They are now widely available online. The church claims that the leaked documents have been distorted and that the OT level texts are only religiously meaningful in the context of the OT courses in which they're provided, thus being incomprehensible to outsiders. Yeah, of course, as a cult, you're gonna do that. Church members who have reached the OT3 level routinely deny these teachings exist, but of course, Hubbard, however, talked about Xenu on several occasions. The Xenu story bears similarities with some of the science fiction stories Hubbard published, and Rothstein noticed that substantial themes from the Xenu story are detectable in Hubbard's book Scientology: A History of Man. Critics of critics of Scientology regularly employ reference to Xenu to mock the movement, believing that the story will be regarded as absurd by outsiders and thus prove detrimental to Scientology. Yeah, critics have also highlighted factual discrepancies regarding the myth. That's what I said. Geologists demonstrate that the Mauna Loa volcano, which appears in the myth, is far younger than 75 million years old. Absolutely. Scientologists nevertheless regard it as a factual account of past events. Again, that's very much crap. Let's see, ethics, morality, and gender roles. Scientology sets forth explicit. Oh, let's see if anybody. I hope that. I'm seeing the previous chat. Okay, I should clear the chat. Oh no, because it doesn't go away. Oh yeah, no, and you're seeing my screen. Oh yeah, because you're. Oh yeah, I did clear that. Oh yeah, because you're seeing my screen. Okay. Scientology sets forth explicit ethical guidelines for its followers to adhere to. In the Scientology worldview, humans are regarded as being essentially good. Its value system was largely compatible with the Protestant dominant culture in which it arose. Scientology professes belief in fundamental human rights. The liberal personal rights of the individual are often stressed as being at the core of Scientologists' creed, and Scientologists have led campaigns to promote the universal declaration of human rights. Well, that's good. Gender and sexuality have been controversial issues in Scientology's history. Women are able to become ministers and rise through the church ranks in the same manner as men. Hubbard's writing makes androcentric assumptions through its use of language. Critics of Scientology say that Hubbard was a misogynist. Hubbard's use of language was also heteronormative, and he described same-sex attraction as a perversion and physical illness, rendering homosexuals extremely dangerous to society. Whereas Free Zone Scientologists have alleged that they encountered homophobia within the church's stance on same-sex sexuality has drawn criticism from gay rights activists. Survival. I'm not sure what this means. Yeah, this is just. Um, this is interesting. Hubbard's birthday, March 13. That's the date that I got COVID. That's the date that, not when I realized I got sick, but when I got first infected from it. So that's interesting. And it was a Friday the 13th. So that's interesting. Okay, let's have a look. Space opera and Scientology. This is sort of maybe the most interesting bit to me is like the cosmology and like and the history, the sort of mythological history. Yeah, so at first there's just Dianetics and there wasn't this thing. But yeah, until the 1950s there was just Dianetics, but then okay, so Church of Scientology was founded in 1953. Um and so yeah, from a psychotherapy sort of thing, it became from psychology, it became a spiritual thing. Um, yeah, so a history of the universe, yeah. And so, oh yeah, so it says there's calling of the past lives. So that's how he did it. But yeah, but that is wrong because that's the history of the past, like your past recollections, that is from the Gorth precisely, and it's wrong. Like people just always recall a bunch of wrong stuff. So that's why you can't trust past life recollections because it's just stuff that the Gorth feeds you. Ugh. Hubbard located his first incident 4 quadrillion years ago. Yeah, so that seems very, very long. That's sort of longer. I mean, that is potentially about as long as I could imagine the universe to exist. Um, but it does seem very long. In which a Thetan encountered loud cracks in brightness and then observed a cherub in a chariot, experiencing total darkness. In Scientology, this is known as Incident 1. Another important event in Scientology's chronology of the universe occurred on a space city known as. See, and this is another thing. I don't go around inventing like names of people and names of particular people or particular planets and stuff. Occurred on a space city known as Ars Laicus, the inhabitants of whom brought about an incident when capturing Thetans. The most controversial portion of Scientology's space opera is the myth of Xenu known as Incident 2. Oh yeah, so that was. Oh, so this is much more recently. But see, it's so like the scale is so different. Like 4 quadrillion is super long ago. I mean, compared to 4 quadrillion, 75 million years ago is incredibly recently, right? It's incredibly recent. But I mean, that's not necessarily false. Like right now, I'm thinking that our current epoch is actually extremely short and basically just started very recently and will again end very soon. And we're only in the second of three major epochs, in fact. So in fact, that does sort of mirror my own thing, and it mirrors also the Indian, like an Indian religion, like Hinduism. There's this idea that there's these cycles, and that the bad middle times in the cycles are much shorter. So there is also, so this is again a recurring theme, and that kind of also further supports this idea, this current more bad central period being shorter. Ruled by the dictator Xenu. Okay, so this is what we already said. Oh, and wait, and whose Thetans were brainwashed on Hawaii, so that's the Hawaii and Canary Islands, introducing various myths such as the myth of Jesus to conceal the Thetans' origins. Eventually, officers of the Galactic Confederacy launched a rebellion against Xenu, which continued for 6 years before capturing him and placing him in electrified prison in the center of a mountain. Hubbard taught that the Thetans brainwashed by Xenu's forces remain on Earth. Okay, so then this is what we said. This is what we already said. Hubbard also taught that upon the death of humans, Thetans continued to implant stations, including locations on planets near Earth, where their memories were erased and new memories emplaced. On grounds that some implant stations were better than others, Hubbard advised his followers to avoid the one on Venus. After passing an implant station, he taught that Thetan returned to Earth where it was incarnated. Hubbard taught the Christian concept of heaven was based on a physical location on another planet which he claimed to have visited. He compared its appearance to Busch Gardens in Pasadena, California, actually located in Van Nuys, California. And noted it contained effigies of characters from the New Testament. Over time, he recalled the location fell into disrepair. A town nearby contained an implant station at which the Thetans were convinced to return there. Another significant encounter in Hubbard's narrative occurred when a large group of planets formed the Markab Confederacy, described as in search of slaves and called a decadent society. The author related that this civilization caused a significant implant upon their encounter with Thetans. Hubbard discussed the history of human civilizations on Earth and lives of ancient sea monsters and fish people as well. But it seems very similar to just New Age religion, in fact, like the new, like theosophical stuff. He also said humans could recover memories of previous lives, such as experiences of clams and Neanderthals. In his mythos, Atlantis was a completely so there is Atlantis again. Just so it is, it's basically it's very similar to like the theosophical New Age religion. It was a completely electronic civilization whose inhabitants possessed disintegration technology. In contrast, Earth was invaded by multiple groups around 1200 BCE, including the 5th Invader Force from Martian Command, against the 4th Invasion Force from Space Command in battle. On premise that Thetans are forced to believe various false ideas, the Church teaches that their courses allow Theta beings to be freed from these beliefs and regain their former abilities. Committed Scientologists pursue courses and procedures offered by the Church in hope of gaining freedom and enlightenment, allegedly permitting travel around the solar system. The author referred to the process of a Thetan leaving its human body as exteriorization, which he said allowed for space travel. Urban notes that this is similar to Aleister Crowley's teachings of astral projection, although he has that. Hubbard did not use that term. Yeah, but that's just a widely recognized thing. I mean, people just do it. I mean, you call it what you want, but even in other religions, people they say they go see heaven and hell and stuff in near-death experiences. It's all the same thing. And that's why I'm saying is quite. I call it Kosh in Zelding, with Kosh meaning consciousness, is a term for just a unit of consciousness, and Zeld being the astral. Let's have a look. Yeah. Okay, so it just seems all this is just repetition of the previous stuff. So, but I mean, just yeah. So this is the thing that was sort of kept secret, and then this kind of stuff is leaked. But it's interesting to see this, so Rothstein argues Scientology's space opera identifies Xenu as the root of evil and Hubbard as the hero for having uncovered the mysteries of the universe. Rothstein states the group's teaching about salvation may be a means to encourage reverence of Hubbard. So it's interesting that there's again this myth of this sort of evil figure, the fall, sort of the original sin, right? And then there's the salvation, like with Jesus. And so I, of course, in my thing, since this is a recurring theme, I've also come up with that. And so obviously I consider myself the savior figure, but I don't consider myself the only one. I consider myself just the one on this planet. And then so there's this bad event of the fall, and so I think that there's this the fall is actually the flood, and it's sort of actually just mainly one event. And so I've already talked about this, and that just to me is what makes the most sense. Okay, so nobody has come, unfortunately. So this is frustrating. I didn't actually get to talk to anyone. So I'll change the title of this, and because it basically just been discussing Scientology. So I'm just gonna call this discussing Scientology.